I never thought my wife would betray me until I discovered her secret with the young lover. But what shocked me more was that she was pregnant, and the father wasn't me. It's not unusual for women over 40 to have a younger lover and eventually get divorced, Colleen said, brushing aside David's sarcasm while preparing for her date. David muttered, sitting in an armchair in the corner watching his wife. Colleen glanced at him briefly, then returned to the mirror to apply eyeliner. You won't leave me, David. Really, do you want to enlighten me on how you came to this conclusion? Because you love me, and despite my plans for the evening, you know that I love you too. It's just a distraction from our life together, and you know it. You wouldn't give up our lifelong commitment for such a small thing. It's very thoughtful of me, really, David teased. Oh, stop it. Every woman in my environment has a lover except me. Even Joan Bennett, the great and powerful one. Yes, even her. She really has a lover. Colleen confirmed. David was sympathetic to the situation. She continued. Of course he understands everything. Why should he care what she does? Everyone knows that he had affairs with his assistants for years, and at the same time they are happily married. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Oh no, I'm not ready yet. Could you open the door? Colleen asked. David gave her a puzzled look, but she was so focused on her makeup that she didn't notice. Actually, I'd rather not do that. I'm completely shocked and offended that you dared to ask your husband to open the door for your lover. With that, David abruptly turned and walked down the hallway of their one-story house. He retired to his office, where he sat silently in a dimly lit room. Meanwhile, Colleen, in socks, went to the front door and opened it for Ryan, a 32-year-old, handsome man who was her companion for the evening. Hi Ryan, I'm sorry for the delay. It looks like my husband is causing more trouble than expected, she said. Ryan simply replied, don't worry, Colleen, you're definitely worth the wait. I'll be there as soon as possible, she replied and headed down the hall to her home office. When she opened the door, the light from the hallway revealed her husband sitting in an armchair, lost in thought. To be honest, he's not my boyfriend. I never called anyone my boyfriend until the third date. Even you when I married you. Unfortunately, David muttered almost inaudibly. I have devoted myself to being a good wife to you for over 20 years. I took care of our house, cooked for you every night, and supported you at all the social events your business required. I play my role as your wife with grace and dedication. But now I feel it's time to give me a little more freedom. It's not about my love for you, but that I want to spread my wings. I hope you can understand what I'm getting at. Let's discuss this later, Colleen said, closing the office door. She headed back into the hallway to continue preparing for the date. Meanwhile, David sat in the dimly lit room, lost in thought. Every morning she went to Starbucks on the ground floor of her office building, where her friend Joan Bennett worked. In the same room was Wendell's company. She and her friends gathered here every day to chat and complete all the necessary tasks for the charity they were involved in. It was a way to keep herself busy and gain some fame for her husband's successful business. David, like other husbands, owned a thriving company provided for them more than enough, especially considering they decided not to have children. Ryan, who also worked in the same building but on a different floor, often crossed paths with her during his visits. He was young and full of energy, resembling a young David. She didn't blame her husband for not being as cheerful as Ryan, considering he was 13 years older, but she felt rejuvenated around Ryan and she loved it. Although they did not have official dates, they had coffee several times when they were in the same place and had free time. She was surprised when he started flirting with her, and even more surprised when she discovered that she reciprocated his feelings. He seemed to take her flirting as a sign of interest and eventually suggested that they have dinner together. When Colleen mentioned that she was married, Ryan brushed it off. Your ring finger is not the part of your body that interests me. He said his sudden interest had awakened something in her, and she began to fantasize about him, imagining him in her bed instead of her husband and David. After sharing her thoughts with her friends, Colleen was shocked to learn that all four of them also had secret young lovers. This revelation broke down the last barrier for Colleen, although her friends did not suspect her true intentions. When she saw Ryan again, she made it clear that she was ready to go on a date with him. They had planned the evening, and it seemed to Ryan that Colleen had resolved all the issues related to her marriage. Colleen, on the other hand, did not dwell on her husband's feelings. She believed that he loved her enough to support her decision and that it would not affect their relationship in any way. Ryan arrived that evening in an elegant Mercedes. Although Colleen was not an expert in cars, she could appreciate the style and luxury of the vehicle. Being married to David, she was used to a luxurious lifestyle and did not want to settle for less with her lover. When they arrived at the restaurant, she waited patiently for Ryan to tip the valet before he escorted her inside. He was undeniably attractive and evoked memories of her young husband. David's hair had turned gray and his physique had changed as at home, but it was all part of the natural course of life. "I'm so glad you accepted my invitation. Colin, you're really amazing." "Thank you, Ryan. I must say your compliments are very flattering. I want to make it clear that I'm happily married and not going to leave my husband. I hope you understand that our evening together is purely platonic and does not involve intimacy. I just wanted to spend time with a charming, intelligent and sophisticated woman like you." The evening was wonderful, their sympathy noticeable during morning coffee dates. The only thing that prevented them from ending up in Ryan's bed was Colleen's personal boundaries. She was definitely interested in taking their relationship to the next level. After dinner they went to a nearby jazz club with a lively dance floor. Throughout the evening they alternated dancing with sitting at a table during the dance. Ryan behaved like a gentleman. He held her hand and put his other hand on her back, never trying to pull her closer or draw attention to his erection. When they were sitting at the table, he casually put his hand on Colleen's hip and she made no move to push him away. As the evening wore on, Ryan grew bolder, his hand moving higher up Colleen's bare leg. Eventually, when he reached a certain point, Colleen put her hand on top of his to prevent him from going any further, but did not remove it. Around midnight they left the club and got into Ryan's car. He didn't start the engine right away, and Colleen wasn't surprised. He put his arm around her shoulders and she clung to him. Although she had never slept with someone on a first date, a kiss was quite possible. For the next 10 minutes, she and Ryan enjoyed each other's company. "I should probably go home," she said. "When can we see each other again?" Ryan asked. "I can't meet every day. Maybe on Sunday. Do you like ballet?" He continued. "My cousin works in the theater and can get us good tickets at the last minute." "I've never been, but I'd love to go," she replied with a smile. "David is not an art lover, but it was a mistake that you picked me up at home." "What time should I come?" "It's a morning performance. Let's meet at 11:00 a.m. to have lunch." Having decided on their plans, they drove back to the house where Colleen lived with David. She gave Ryan a quick kiss before getting out of the car and preparing to confront her husband, imagining him sulking in his office chair or waiting in the living room to start an argument. He could move his things to a spare room to deliver a message. In general, she was ready, but what caught her off guard was that he was sleeping peacefully in their bed after taking off her makeup in the bathroom. She considered her next steps. Does his deep slumber mean that he has accepted the situation? Should I wake him up to talk or wait until morning? The thought that he might leave before they had time to talk haunted her, and she wondered what to do next. At least David was here. He stirred in his sleep, not fully awake yet. "David, what don't you want to talk?" "No, I just want to sleep." Colleen sighed, deciding to get ready for bed. She picked out a matching nightgown from the closet. "I still have a question for you." "Did you sleep with him?" David asked. Colleen quickly replied, "No, David. It was just a date." I've never made love to a man on a first date before, but this time you're looking for a potential intimate partner, not a husband. So I thought maybe your approach had changed. Are you going to meet him again?" She paused before answering. "We're going to the ballet on Sunday afternoon and we'll have lunch before that. It shouldn't affect us. You met him on Friday evening and now on Sunday afternoon, when we usually spend time together." David said it's interesting, but when she turned around she realized that he had already gone to bed and most likely did not hear her. She went back to the closet to finish getting ready for bed. She hoped David would be more open to the idea, as her friends' husbands had been. It is known that men's performance decreases with age. She wanted men to be more understanding of women seeking satisfaction elsewhere. After all, it's just an intimate relationship, as they say. When Helen woke up the next morning, she wasn't surprised to find David missing. His reaction the night before made it clear that an adjustment period should be expected, hoping he wouldn't be gone too long. She planned to spend the whole day with him, as she had a date with Ryan on Sunday, but as the morning turned into noon, it became obvious that David was deliberately avoiding her. She considered the possibility that he went to the office for work on Saturday to stay away from her. Deciding to find him, she assumed that he would not answer calls either on his cell phone or on his office phone. When she arrived at the parking lot, she found David's car in its usual place. After checking at the security desk, she recognized the guards and took the elevator to the 7th floor. She headed to David's office, as she had done many times before. "Colleen, Oscar has announced your arrival. What brings you here?" David asked. "I just want to spend time with my husband. Really, is your boyfriend busy today?" "Please stop being immature, David. You've never been the only important person in my life. I see my friends regularly during the week. If you don't make love to them, it's not comparable. I'm sorry you're suffering from this, David. I've been trying to assure you that my relationships with other people won't affect our marriage or my feelings for you. I adore you with all my heart and soul and really want to spend the rest of my life with you. So why are you acting like this? Colleen, it's hurting me away to show your love for me. I think it's selfish. I can say the same about you, David. By and large, my connection with him is no more important to our marriage than my friendship with other women, so I don't understand why you're so upset. Can't you even mention his name? Colleen, I'm trying not to upset you anymore. It seems to me that hiding his identity would be less harmful. I understand I don't remember the last time. Went to a meeting with colleagues, but you met with him last night and plan to meet with him tomorrow. He seems to be more important than them. As I said last night, this is the only way to get to know him better. You know, I've never been in a hurry with physical intimacy. Even in college, David interrupted. We'll move on to the physical aspect. It's okay if you insist on it. I will do it discreetly so that you won't notice when it happens. And I will spend this time apart from our usual time together. Great. You're going to be an inconspicuous woman. Right. Colleen winced at the insult but decided not to argue. He seemed resigned to the situation and she didn't want to cause trouble. I was hoping that we would spend a day together, as I said last week. The quarterly reports are due next week, so I'll be in the office all day on Saturday to collect the data. I was hoping that we could spend time together on Friday night and Sunday, as we usually do, but it seems like I'm not a priority for you. I'm sorry, David, probably because of everything that's going on. I forgot about our plans. It's alright. I still need to focus on my work, but it's important to me. Let's go to the coast tonight when I finish work. I can book us a room at the DO and we'll spend tomorrow there. The ballet tickets have already been paid for. I received an invitation earlier. I will feel guilty if I refuse now. It's okay. Colleen, I didn't think you'd agree. I knew you'd choose him over me. You can go now. She knew he wouldn't listen to her anymore. With a heavy sigh, she left his office, disappointed that things had not turned out the way she wanted. At first, she assumed that David would be upset, but believed that over time she would come to terms with her happiness and appreciate her desire to always be with him. After a short period of dating Ryan, she planned to focus on building a closer relationship with him. She had already shared this plan with Ryan and intended to have several dates in a more intimate setting than a cafe. In her opinion, 5 dates would be enough to figure out if she was ready to take the next step in a relationship with him. But she was going to do it only during the day or when David would be unavailable. She was torn between wanting this opportunity and not wanting it to cause problems in her marriage, as he did every Saturday before the quarterly reports. David did not return home until closer to midnight. Colleen wondered how he was going to handle the data collection and the proposed trip, but then realized he wasn't going to do it. He admitted that she would choose Ryan and that it would be unfair to cancel their plans because of a last-minute idea. Colleen hoped that David would be in a romantic mood today. After long days like these, he often enjoyed quiet moments of intimacy when he returned home. According to him, it helped him relax and remember what he was working so hard for sometimes. This led to them making love, which Colleen always looked forward to because of her deep love for him. When she began to feel tired, she cheered up when she heard the garage door open. Looking forward to her husband entering the bedroom, she lay down on the blanket, exposing her bare shoulders. "How are you, dear?" she asked as usual. He replied and began to undress in the bedroom. But when it was time to completely undress, he suddenly headed to the bathroom. Colleen's hopes rose when she heard the shower turn on, but they were dashed when David appeared in his usual shorts. Colleen saw this as a chance to throw back the plait and show herself, "My love, maybe we can resume our relationship tonight. Are you sure your boyfriend won't worry?" David said, "David, these remarks won't help. Can't we just enjoy each other's company tonight as a married couple, as a man and a woman, as lovers, without caring about anyone else?" David was clearly torn. Despite her decisions, he was still deeply attached to her and she never stopped worrying about him. He believed that she was being honest about not having an intimate relationship with this other man. Yet remembering how they kissed after the first date, he couldn't help but assume that she would stay true to herself. He knew that his only chance was to give his best and try to convince her not to do it. After all, as soon as she crosses the line and makes love to Ryan, he does not intend to continue their physical relationship. He quickly took off his shorts, earning a grateful smile from his wife. Over the next 2 hours, Colleen used her gorgeous body to please her husband and was glad that he responded to her with the same enthusiasm. She hoped that her husband would see it fully satisfy him while simultaneously striving for her own satisfaction with Ryan. In the meantime, he hoped that she would be satisfied enough to abandon her plans to take a lover. The next morning, David tried to hold her back, hoping she wouldn't want to leave to meet her lover. He showered her with caresses, hugged her and kissed her to express his love. Over time he sensed her concern and realized that his plan was working. He allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. At 10:00, Colleen gently released herself from his embrace. "I'm sorry, David. I need to start packing," she apologized. His attempt to win her over again was unsuccessful. As before, she chose her boyfriend over him. "Of course," he replied, sat down and quickly put on his shorts, trying to remain modest. The idea that his wife, who had seen him naked countless times, was preparing to meet her lover while seeing him naked seemed particularly offensive to him. Without deigning to look at her, he left the bedroom. Kim felt the pain of sadness as she watched her husband leave. She treasured their morning hugs very much and stayed in bed as long as possible. Reluctantly, she got up to take a shower and get ready to meet Ryan. There was no question of going to him smelling of intimacy with her husband USB'd. It would be disrespectful and rude. As well as returning to her husband after intimacy with Ryan in the future, she pondered the situation as the water ran down her and looked for ways to ease David's pain. The only solution she could come to was to completely abandon the idea of having a lover. but that was not an option she wanted to consider. She dressed in a modest but seductive outfit, complete with stockings, jeans and matching underwear. Although she wasn't going to show Ryan her underwear, she felt confident and attractive in it. Time was running out and she hurriedly prepared to leave, calling David in the hope of saying goodbye to him and assuring him of her love. But when she called him, there was silence. She searched his office, but he was nowhere to be found. It was only when she looked into the garage and saw that their beloved 1968 Mustang convertible was missing that she realized he had left without saying a word. Taking a deep breath, she locked the house and headed to the restaurant. Her attention was focused on meeting Ryan, so she did not notice the unremarkable sedan that was following her from their neighborhood. When she pulled up, Ryan was already outside and she apologized for being a few minutes late. After kissing her on the cheek and assuring her that it was not a problem, they quickly sat down at the table in the company of this charming and attractive young man. All thoughts of David flew out of her head. The conversation at lunch was easy and she found herself enjoying it immensely, as she always did with Ryan. The food was delicious and she couldn't help but think about her husband, wondering if it wouldn't be appropriate to offer him lunch here in the future, since they had never been here before. The ballet was amazing, and she was overwhelmed by Ryan's extensive knowledge of the arts. He innocently explained the plot and the symbolic meaning of each movement. In many ways, David was very different from him, and she couldn't help but wonder what kind of experiences she'd missed out on because of it. This was not a criticism of David, because no one can be interested in everything, but she realized how well Ryan and David complemented each other. She believed that any new interest she wanted to pursue would most likely find a response from one of them, if she could somehow involve David in this. Her relationship with Ryan could go beyond just a physical connection. After attending the ballet, they went for a short walk to the nearby hills. The terrain now led them to a small observation deck that offered a stunning view of the city landscape. Colleen couldn't help but wonder if she was the only woman Ryan had brought to this place, but knowing his past, she didn't take it personally. She understood why he had decided to bring her here. "You are a wonderful woman, Colleen. I'm lucky to have you here with me," Ryan said. "I think we're both lucky, Ryan." Colleen replied with a smile, and from that moment their passionate kiss began. The intense desire she felt for this strong young man overwhelmed her feelings, making her doubt whether she would be able to hold out until their fifth date. Pulling him closer, their kisses became more passionate. Realizing that the next step would most likely lead to them going all the way, she reluctantly pulled away from him once more. Ryan's disappointment was obvious. "I'm sorry, Ryan. I really want this. But, as I said before, I have boundaries that I have to respect." "I see what you're getting at, Colleen. I understand that you want to feel comfortable before we go any further, and you've already set a few days when we can meet. It just occurred to me that all our meetings over a cup of coffee should have some significance in terms of getting to know each other. Perhaps I was too impulsive in this matter. Perhaps this is just a push she needs to accelerate the implementation of her plans." "When can you have lunch?" he asked. Considering his intentions, it won't work on Mondays, but it should work on Tuesday. "I'll have time to clean up before I go home. Please plan everything accordingly. I'll bring the necessary supplies and discuss the details tomorrow morning at Starbucks." Ryan returned to the restaurant parking lot to pick up Colleen's car. She arrived home around 6:30 p.m. and entered an empty house. Feeling elated, checking her phone for a message from David, she didn't find one and hurried into the bedroom, listening to the sound of the garage door opening. As soon as she heard the sound of the garage door opening signaling David's arrival, she quickly changed into an evening dress and headed to the kitchen to start cooking dinner. Due to David's unpredictable schedule, she had learned how to cook delicious meals in no time. As she started to get the ingredients out of the fridge, David appeared from the garage. "Hello, dear. How was your day?" she asked, bending down to kiss him. He turned away, avoiding her lips, clearly still upset that she had left their bed earlier that morning to meet Ryan. Despite his short sentences, she found comfort in the fact that he was still talking to her. She had hoped that making love the night before would bring them closer together, but it seemed that leaving his bed had nullified all remnants of goodwill. She noticed that he didn't ask how her day was. "Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes. She informed him. "Great. I'll be in the office," he replied. Colleen quickly cooked a teriyaki roast with rice and invited David to dinner. He washed his hands before joining her at the table. She tried to make small talk. "So where did you ride today?" she asked. He replied without emotion, "Nowhere in particular. I just got on the highway and drove." "Did you make any stops along the way?" "I stopped for lunch at a small shop near the highway and took a few breaks to stretch my legs. That's all." Colleen tried to turn the conversation to her day, but David abruptly interrupted her. "I don't care about your day, Colleen. I didn't try to no more talking about this topic." David stood up abruptly, dropping his half-eaten lunch without saying a word. He headed down the corridor and disappeared into his office. Colleen sat in silence for a few minutes before deciding to clear the table. She couldn't help but think that it was a mistake. She packed the leftovers so David could take them to work with him if he wanted to. He always liked the way she cooked. In the evening she cleaned up the house, hoping that David would eventually leave his office and they could spend together. She hoped to save a bad evening by simply sharing her love of ballet with him and that it might interest him in the future. Ryan shouldn't have cared, but David couldn't seem to separate the two topics. Disappointed, she retired to the bedroom, got ready for bed and lay down with a book, still hoping that David would join her. Towards midnight, it became clear that David was avoiding her and waiting for her to fall asleep in order to go to bed. Reluctantly, Colleen closed her book and turned off the light, losing the interest in reading. She slid back between the blankets, wondering if her subconscious guilt was affecting how she interpreted her husband's actions. Quickly discarding this thought, she realized with her mind and heart that she had done nothing wrong and that her love for her husband was still strong. Whatever the problem was, it was definitely not bad. She couldn't shake the feeling that David was deliberately avoiding her. Deciding not to make the situation worse, she closed her eyes and fell asleep easily. The next morning she woke up in an empty bed and realized that David had already left for work. She wasn't sure if he'd even gone to bed the night before. She began to feel upset by his behavior. Despite her attempts to assure him of the reliability of their marriage, he continued to feign discontent and let these emotions control him. She decided that she had enough. She would no longer put up with his behavior. Colleen decided to continue her relationship with Ryan while retaining the role of David's devoted wife, but she was no longer going to beg him to play his part. She stuck to her usual daily routine, dressed as usual and met up with friends at Starbucks. When she saw Ryan sitting in the corner, their eyes immediately met. After buying coffee, she joined him at the table. They were reserved and avoided public displays of affection. "I couldn't stop thinking about you last night," Ryan confessed me to. "Ryan," she replied. "I can't wait for tomorrow," he whispered, handing her a small note. "Here are the details for tomorrow. My apartment is a few minutes away from here and I thought it would be better than a hotel. There's more privacy and there's no risk of someone catching us checking in. Thanks for being careful, Ryan. I don't want to cause my husband any more pain than he is already experiencing." "Of course," he replied. They chatted for a while longer before Ryan had to leave for work. Although she knew that all her friends had young partners, she kept her plans with Ryan to herself. She was afraid that she would have problems with David if he found out, so she intended to keep everything a secret. That evening, she was happy when David greeted her warmly and joined her for dinner. They had a nice conversation, avoiding any mention of her lover. Colleen was glad and hoped that David was beginning to realize that her relationship with Ryan would not affect their relationship. She did not perceive his actions as an attempt to prevent her from dating someone else. Although it was true, the next day she arrived at Ryan's apartment. where she was greeted with open arms. Ryan wasted no time dragging her inside and showering her with caresses. As soon as the door closed, they found themselves in a passionate embrace, readily responding to each other's advances. Both were eager to finally be together, and they decided that foreplay was unnecessary. A few minutes after Colleen walked through his door, she found herself lying on her back, making love to a man who wasn't her husband. For the first time in 25 years, she was begging for more, as if the whole process was one long drawn-out climax. They relaxed in each other's arms on Ryan's bed, enjoying the moment. "Was it amazing? Was I better than your husband?" he asked. Colleen stood up and met Ryan's gaze. "We are not discussing my husband," she said firmly. "Hugh's a great partner, and I'm not here because I'm unhappy with him. If you try to turn this into a competition, I'll leave and we'll see each other for the last time. Do you understand?" Ryan quickly reassured her. "Of course I didn't mean anything by it. I just want to make sure you're happy." Colleen relaxed back into his arms. "It was wonderful," she said. "I really enjoyed being with you, and I'm looking forward to more moments like this." For more than 2 hours, they continued to make love in a more gentle and affectionate manner, and during their first passionate meeting, Colleen was impressed by Ryan's ability to please her and his willingness to follow her lead in bed. Although Ryan was similar to David in some ways, he had his own unique qualities that Colleen found attractive. On the other hand, Ryan found Colleen's graceful figure attractive because he was always drawn to older and more mature women. He imagined a future in which they would have a full and lasting relationship. She didn't want to divorce her husband, and he didn't want to get married. He had tried cohabiting with his girlfriends before, but it always ended in disaster. He preferred personal space and couldn't stand the constant presence of someone nearby. An adult married woman was an ideal option for him. Realizing that they had been together for almost 3 hours, Colleen went into the shower. She took soap, shampoo and feminine hygiene products with her to freshen up. Colleen left her personal belongings at Ryan's apartment so that they would be on hand if necessary. After the last kiss, they said goodbye and Colleen went to work. While waiting for her husband to return, Colleen tried to tidy herself up, checking her reflections several times to make sure everything looked perfect. If David remained unaware of her meeting with Ryan, it would help to avoid possible conflicts. At 7:13 p.m., David walked in the door and was warmly greeted by Colleen. She hugged him and kissed him on the cheek, but noticed a sudden change in his behavior. David's arms dropped to his sides and his body looked tense. He pulled back and a worried expression appeared on Colleen's face. "Colleen, you slept with him today, didn't you?" he asked. "What, David? I don't understand what makes you think that you are a creature of habit." "Colleen, I know your habits better than anyone else. When we were more active, an afternoon shower was commonplace, but in recent years this hasn't happened unless there was a special reason. Until today. I haven't noticed for years that the smell of your soap and shampoo was so strong at this time of day," David said. "Considering everything, the only logical explanation is that you recently took a shower with the intention of washing off or disguising what happened after being with him. Although it's still preferable to the alternative, I appreciate your efforts. All you have achieved is revealing what you were trying to hide." He walked past her and entered the office. She cursed under her breath, certain that her plan had failed. She underestimated the scent that gave her away. She hoped to keep her actions a secret from David, telling him only that she would be busy at some point. But now she had to rethink her approach. Sighing, she pulled herself together and set about preparing dinner. Dinner was simple. She cooked boiled chicken breast with carrots and linguine noodles. After laying out the food and setting the table, she nervously headed to the office. "David, dinner is ready." She called. "I'm not hungry," he replied. "Darling, you need to eat." She insisted. "I'm fine, thanks," he replied. "David, please, you have to take care of yourself. I doubt you've been eating anything healthy all day." she urged. I tried to be polite in this matter, but I see that nothing will work out. And I was in the first, who is sack, and I don't want to eat what you cooked. I'll find something for myself. Later he waved her off. She left the room, feeling that she wasn't hungry either. Colleen carefully put the food in the fridge, deciding that she could give it to one of Joan's colleagues if David didn't eat it. Despite her wealth, Colleen could not accept the idea of wasting food, because she grew up in a family where it was difficult to find food on the table throughout the evening. Colleen thought about how to see Ryan without David knowing about it. It was very important for her to keep everything a secret, regardless of whether he knew about their affair. He should not know the exact time of their meetings. Surprisingly, the idea of not doing it at all did not occur to her. She went to bed alone and fell asleep more easily than expected. She attributed it to the satisfaction she felt with Ryan earlier in the day. Even worrying about David finding out didn't stop her from falling asleep. When she woke up around 4 in the morning, she found that David had disappeared from their bed. Not surprised by his absence, she was shocked to see that he was sleeping with his head on the table. She gently woke him up and called out, David, honey, I understand that you're upset, but it's not good for you to sleep like this. Go to bed, or, if you want, you can go to the spare room. It's bad for your back to sleep in this position. I know you're mad at me, but I still love you and I want to take care of you, please. David woke up wiping saliva from his hands and mouth. He felt disoriented, as he usually did when he woke up, and wasn't sure if the previous events were real or if it was just a nightmare. So he allowed himself to be led to their bedroom down the hall, when she began to undress him. He was seized with a sudden realization that all this was real. He perceived her actions as an attempt to seduce him and immediately began to resist. Stop, Colleen, stop, he begged David. I'm just trying to get you ready for bed. She explained calmly, but he didn't want her to do that. Please stop. Just a few more buttons. She insisted. Disappointed, he pushed her away. Damn it. Colleen, get your dirty hands off me. He snapped. Colleen recoiled, stung by his harsh words. David had raised his voice before, but in the last 25 years she could count on her fingers how many times it had happened. Sitting at the table, she unsuccessfully fought back tears. I was just trying to undress you so you could go to bed. I didn't try to do anything else, she explained. He replied, I know, I just didn't like that. You were touching me with hands that were on another man's body less than a day ago. It's all right. I think I understand this, although not completely. I've showered and washed my hands many times since then, but I know it has more to do with your mentality. I'm sorry, David. I'm leaving you, Colleen said, then went into another room to give David the time he needed to get into bed. Despite his initial reaction, she was sure that in time David would come to terms with the situation, even though everything was falling apart. She never once thought about breaking up with Ryan. On the contrary, she saw it as a challenge to her determination and perseverance, vowing not to give up. She checked on David, who was already asleep, then returned to her bed and quickly fell asleep. The next day, Wednesday, David informed her by text message that he would be late at work, showing at least some attention. Even without the usual phone call, she realized that she would not be able to do much to support him in this difficult moment. She had already done everything she could as she prepared for their next conversation. She knew exactly what to say. The anticipation of meeting Ryan on Thursday morning was nagging at her. The day before, they had agreed to meet at Starbucks to make a schedule of meetings. Mondays were unavailable due to Ryan's busy schedule, and Colleen decided to avoid Fridays and weekends, to respect the time she spent with David. They decided to meet at Ryan's apartment on Tuesdays and Thursdays, not wanting to meet too often or too close together. The meeting with her friend seemed to last forever, and as soon as it was over, she practically ran out of the building. She had to consciously fight the urge to exceed the speed limit so that she wouldn't be stopped. She had heard that forbidden intimacy was the most exciting, but couldn't understand what attracted her so much, the excitement of a new partner after so many years. She entered Ryan's apartment, the door of which, as promised, was unlocked. Ryan was already lying on the bed. As before, they didn't need any foreplay. They quickly began another passionate session which lasted about 3 hours. Fortunately, Ryan's flexible schedule allowed them to spend time together. She couldn't deny that Ryan seemed to be a better lover than David, although she would never admit it. This was not surprising, considering that David was a loyal and devoted husband who did everything possible to make her happy in bed. On the contrary, Ryan had been with many women and had acquired various skills that he brought to bed with Colleen. In the end, it was time to leave and return home. After checking her phone, she found no messages and decided that David would be home at his usual time. As she dressed and got behind the wheel, she thought about what she would say to him that evening. After taking a shower and washing thoroughly, she realized that the scent might give her away, but she had a plan for that. Wearing her usual leisure clothes, she sat and waited for David to come home. He walked in the door shortly before 7 in the evening, and she greeted him with good evening. "Dear David, are you going to eat my cooking today, or should I just worry about myself?" "I'm fine. I had a snack on my way home," he replied. "You shouldn't eat fast food. It's not healthy." "I know, I'll be in the office," he said and left David. "When you have a minute, I'd like to discuss something with you," she said to him. "Okay," he replied and disappeared into his office at the end of the corridor while Colleen was concentrating on preparing for the fundraiser. She noticed that David didn't seem to want to start the conversation she wanted so much. Eventually she closed her laptop and entered his office. "David, can we talk now?" she asked. He reluctantly replied. Maybe. Colleen sat down in a chair and said, "Darling, I want you to know that I love you deeply. My new relationship does not change my attitude towards our marriage. I accept your point of view, even if it may not coincide with mine. This is what I consider necessary for myself and what I desire. I was hoping for more openness and understanding on your part, but unfortunately this did not happen. David, I want to say that I'm willing to be patient and give you the time you need to get through this. I will continue to be present every evening and weekend. I hope that we can still spend time together and be close, as we always have been. But you decide to ignore me during this time. I'll have to put up with it. But I'll still be here hoping that we can get through this. So you intend to continue dating Ryan?" "Yes, and you thought it would be difficult for me to find out his name?" "Colleen." "No, I guess I just assumed that you wouldn't want to know him also." "David, I want to apologize for that incident on Tuesday, when it became apparent during the afternoon shower that I was having an affair with Ryan. I don't want you to know where I'm meeting him, so I'll start taking a shower after lunch on weekdays. I assure you, we don't see each other very often, but this way I'll always be in the same state when you come home from work every day. I understand that this may not be an ideal option, but it is the best solution I can offer at the moment. So, Colleen, is this your final decision on this matter? Is there anything I can say or do to convince you to end your relationship with Ryan?" "I'm sorry, David, but no, well, I appreciate your honesty, although that's not what I was hoping to hear. I guess I'll have to figure out how to handle it. Is that all you wanted to tell me?" "Just that I love you, darling. I truly love you. I hope you understand that my love for you does not depend on the physical needs that Ryan satisfies." David smiled wryly and nodded. Regretfully, Colleen waited a few moments to see if her husband wanted to say anything else, then quietly left the office and carefully closed the door behind her. She was nervous about the conversation, but proud of herself for handling it successfully. She was sure that David would understand her point of view as soon as he realized its importance to her and minimal impact on their relationship. Keeping her promise, Colleen stayed at home on Friday evening and throughout the weekend, leaving the house only to run a few short errands that took no more than an hour. She asked her husband to accompany her, hoping to assure him that her intentions were innocent, but he decided not to join her. Communication between them was minimal. David did not show hostility, but also did not show over affection. Colleen understood that David was still getting used to his new lifestyle and she was ready to give him time. Despite David's lack of reaction to her attempts at intimacy on Saturday night, Colleen did not lose hope and was confident that everything would get better over time. She knew the main reason for his behavior, but was not discouraged. She believed that although there might be difficulties ahead, DVE would eventually realize that things would improve. David left early on Monday morning, and Colleen suspected that such a routine would last for some time. Despite the inconvenience of having to take a shower in the middle of the day to calm David's feelings, she believed that eventually everything would return to normal. After meeting with her friends, she listened to how they spent the weekend with their partners, as they shared their stories. Colleen recalled the time she spent with Ryan. The memory stirred emotions in her, making her heart beat faster and her body heat up. "Are you all right, Colleen? Your face is a little red." "I'm fine. I'm just a little hot," Colleen replied, taking a sip of water to cool down. She tried to focus on the story she was telling, but Ryan's presence continued to creep into her thoughts. Afraid to betray her feelings, she pushed them aside and successfully distracted herself with other thoughts. After a weekday Monday night with David, Colleen began to prepare for a meeting with Ryan on Tuesday. Ryan met her in a bathrobe, which she immediately threw off and eagerly hugged her. Without hesitation or warning, he took control and she surrendered to the acute pleasure of the moment. After a passionate date, they rested in each other's arms. "I understand that your husband is upset, Colleen, but I can't help but ask how things are at home. Do you feel safe?" Ryan asked. "Thanks for the concern. Ryan, listen to this, but David poses no threat." Colleen assured him it is difficult for him to adapt to the new conditions, which makes us feel detached and cold. "He seems to be avoiding me, even though he denies it. Are you still in touch? This could be a positive sign. I express my love and support to him and try to be with him. It will take him a while to realize that you are not a threat to our marriage." They spent another hour making love before Ken left after cleaning herself up and taking a bath in the shower. She settled down with a book, waiting for David to come home or at least send a message at 7:36 p.m. He walked in the door. "Hello dear. How are things at work?" She greeted him. "It's okay," he replied. "Do you want to have dinner tonight?" She asked. "I had a late lunch." "It's okay," he replied. "Is there anything you want to talk about?" She asked. "No. I'll be in the office," he said and disappeared into the room. "Okay. I'll be here if you need me or when you will," she added playfully. When the door softly closed, Colleen was alone in the living room. Again. She thought about how David seemed to divide his time between working and avoiding her in the office, but decided to give him free rein as planned when she returned to her book. She felt confident that she had made the right choice. In the following weeks, Colleen continued to date Ryan on Tuesdays and Thursdays, enjoying passionate intimacy with him. Her evenings and weekends with David remained the same. They maintained a respectful relationship, communicating when necessary. Ken constantly invited David to dinner, but he always had an excuse to refuse. Every evening, David went to his office, leaving Colleen to read, do charity, work, watch TV or surf the internet. Despite the moments of loneliness, Colleen did not lose hope that she could have a loving and present husband, as well as a passionate and attentive her. This faith helped her to endure the loneliness with fortitude. This went on for 3 months until Colleen finally noticed a change in her husband's behavior. Although the daily routine remained the same, he began to come home with a more positive attitude, even if he came later than usual. They began to have dinner together several times a week and sometimes enjoyed each other's company, watching intriguing TV shows or just sitting and reading together. Although the romantic relationship between them did not resume, Ken was sure that the changes in her husband's behavior indicated a shift in his attitude. She believed it was only a matter of time before physical intimacy resumed. However, 3 more months passed without any progress, and they were no closer to resuming their relationship. It seemed their relationship had reached a dead end, and they looked more like neighbors or friends than a couple moving forward. Although Colleen was grateful for the progress she had made, she couldn't wait for their relationship to develop further. Despite her amazing closeness to Ryan, she had no feelings for him and longed for the intimate connection she shared with David with Ryan. It was just a physical connection with David. It was love, and she really missed it. That evening she decided to talk openly about it with David. "I want you to know how much I appreciate your understanding of my relationship with Ryan. I know it wasn't easy for you." She began. "Well, you left me no choice," Colleen, David replied. "I know, and I'm sorry that things turned out this way, but I'm still worried about our lack of intimacy or any kind of intimate life." She admitted it's been a long time since we last made love. "After I started dating Ryan, I missed the closeness between us. I'm happy with what's happening, but I can't help but wonder when we can move on." "I didn't say it directly, Colleen, but I have no plans to make love to you." "David, this is absurd. I always make sure to be very clean for you. We have no reason not to be close. I understand your point of view, but I don't feel the same way. You made a decision that I didn't agree with. Don't forget about it. I also have the right to make a choice and impose it on you," David said, getting up and heading for the bed. Colleen was stunned by this sudden statement of control. She hoped her affair with Ryan would ignite a spark in David and encourage him to fight for her favor. Although she hadn't started to see Ryan to make David jealous, she saw it as a possible added bonus to their relationship. Colleen had never imagined a scenario in which she would not have intimacy with David while dating someone else. He couldn't resist forever. She was confident in her plan and believed that everything would fall into place. Colleen decided to quietly increase the pressure on David. Until now she had given him the opportunity to think things over, but now she felt he needed a little push. She held back, hoping that eventually he would want to have an intimate relationship with her again. After hearing his statement that he would give up his affections while Ryan was around, she changed her strategy. She decided to intensify flirtation. She would become more physically attractive, for example, clinging to him with her whole body. She wore revealing clothes to bed, or maybe didn't wear anything at all, although she had never slept naked before. She was ready to change that. Her goal was to make it almost impossible for him to resist her, knowing that once he succumbed, he would no longer be able to reject her. This plan seemed foolproof, but unfortunately, in the end nothing worked. Over the next 2 months, Colleen tried every possible way to convince her husband to try, but he showed no interest. Despite her best efforts, he remained detached after she abandoned this thought-for plan. It had been 8 months since their last intimate meeting. Although Ryan met her physical needs, she longed for the emotional connection that making love to David provided. Colleen felt increasingly frustrated and dissatisfied. After remaining in this status for another month, she finally decided to accept whatever David was ready to offer. If he wasn't interested in a physical relationship because of her connection to Ryan, then so be it. If he preferred a sexless relationship, she would accept it. She decided to show her love for him in different ways and accept any affection he was willing to give. This fateful decision marked the beginning of their last journey together. On a warm Wednesday morning, Colleen parked her Lexus outside her husband's office building, grabbing her purse. She checked in at the security desk and then went up to the 7th floor. It had been a long time since she had last visited the office during daylight hours, and she hadn't appreciated how crowded it was. Terry, David's trusted secretary, immediately noticed her when she got out of the elevator. "Mrs. Lynch, it's great to have you back. It's been a long time since your last visit." Terry greeted her warmly. Hi Terry. I'm glad to see you too. Is David in his office? She asked, already heading for his office. Yes, he's in his office. But could you wait a minute? Terry asked. They are working with confidential documents this morning, so I have been instructed to announce to everyone who comes. Terry grabbed the phone and dialed David's number. Mr. Lynch, your wife is here to see you. She said. Colleen couldn't make out David's reply, but she heard his voice on the other end of the line. After a short conversation, Terry informed Colleen. It will only take a couple of minutes, Mrs. Lynch. He needs to certify some documents. Colleen nodded in understanding and took the opportunity to look around the office. While waiting, she recognized several acquaintances and noticed some new faces in the room. She couldn't help but notice that Eileen's desk was empty. Eileen had been David's trusted personal assistant for many years, so Colin assumed she was in his office with him. A moment later the door opened and a stunning woman appeared on the threshold. She was shorter than Colleen, with flowing dark brown hair and a graceful figure that strained at the buttons of her blouse. Colleen estimated her age to be between 20 and 30 years old. Colleen immediately disliked her. Mrs. Lynch, it's very nice to finally meet you. My name is Alana. She greeted with a smile, leading the way. Alana invited Ken to follow her into David's office. Colleen walked behind her, feeling insecure and out of place. She knew she had walked this path with Eileen many times before, but the situation was different now. Eileen, being older and married, had friendly conversations during their walks, but with Alana it felt unusual and awkward. When they reached David's office, Alana lingered in the doorway while Colleen entered, feeling the tension in the air. Thank you, Mama. Now you can take a break for lunch. We will continue at 0. David said yes. Sir, Alana replied sharply, leaving the office and closing the door behind her. How does she even walk in those shoes and not fall? Wondered Colin. I hope you didn't come here to make snide remarks about my assistant. David interjected. Your assistant? What about Eileen? She asked. Was she promoted? She is now an executive assistant to the owner and CEO. David explained the work became too much for her, especially since she just turned 60 and needed to rest. I decided to create a new position for her, with less responsibility and no need for business trips. Will she accompany you on your trips now? It's funny and ironic to see you jealous, given the circumstances. Colleen remarked. Why are you here? Colleen, to have lunch with my husband. David asked. I see. Of all the days you chose Wednesday, I don't see the difference. It's been about a year since you last came here during the week. Why are you here now? He continued. Because I miss my husband. I want to spend time with him. I love you, whether you believe it or not, and I just wanted to see you. Colleen replied. All right. Colleen, a new Vietnamese restaurant has opened on the next street and it's very tasty. Let's have lunch there. David had suggested. They walked in silence, occasionally commenting on passing objects. Colleen wrapped her arm around David, but he didn't seem to mind. They were quickly seated and the hostess greeted David by name, allowing Ken to assume he was a regular visitor. They engaged in casual conversation, and David recommended a few dishes before they ordered lunch. Colleen reached out and took David's hand, feeling satisfied that he didn't pull away. Do you believe that I love you, David? She asked. Love? What kind of fantasy world do you live in? How can you love me after what you've done? David replied. I have to admit you picked a pretty decent guy. Colleen retorted. What do you mean? How do you know anything about Ryan? She asked. Actually, I know quite a lot. I've done my research. David confessed. I've checked him out. That's how I gathered so much information about him, including your regular visits to his apartment every Tuesday and Thursday. I also noticed that you conveniently meet with me on Wednesdays to chat. But as I said, at least he's not a crook or a gold digger. You can turn a blind eye to this, but I prefer to be aware of it. David continued. I own a very successful company and we earn significant money. Maybe you were just looking for an opportunity to meet him. I apologize for bringing up personal topics. I had to think about the fact that his motives might not be entirely noble, especially considering that he is involved with a married woman. But it seems he's only interested in physical relationships and has no intention to blackmail us. I doubt very much that he's capable of such a thing. David, let's change the subject. I came here to be with you and discuss our relationship. Colleen redirected. What relationship? Colleen. We look more like neighbors and friends than a married couple. We haven't had intimacy for almost a year. Colleen added, it's your decision. David. He grinned and replied, yes. This is my decision. Isn't it because you decided to cheat on me? Colleen. We don't make love, and the little time we spend together is limited to watching TV or staying in the same room. That's why I'm here today. I'm not satisfied with the current situation. I want to change something. I want to clarify that. I do not plan to give up communication with Ryan, but I want to maximize the time we spend together. It seems that this is where our misunderstanding lies. From my point of view, as long as you're dating Ryan, that's the best it can be. I disagree. David. I believe that our marriage can be as strong as ever. Spending time with Ryan doesn't stop me from spending time with you. I don't have romantic feelings for him, so my emotions are not divided. Simply put, I can't view the time I spend with Ryan in the same light as the time I spend with my friends. It's not just another interest. It's completely different. I don't mind you spending time with your friends because no one should revolve around one person in their life. But I can't continue our marriage as if nothing is happening while you're with another man. Your claim that everything remains the same is ridiculous. There used to be 2 people in our marriage. Now there are 3. So, no, it's not the same as before and it will never be the same as before. Your denial of love for him is disgusting. You see him as just a tool for intimacy. Do you use your lover as a toy for your pleasures? David's anger grew throughout his tirade, despite Colleen's unsuccessful attempts to calm him down. In the end, he threw 50 on the table and ran out. Colleen hurriedly packed her things, muttered an apology to the nearby customers, who watched her with disapproving glances, and left the restaurant. Quickly she glanced toward David's office and noticed his cheerful gait in the distance. Realizing she wouldn't be able to catch up with him, she decided to take her time and return to her car. She could barely contain her emotions until she reached the safety of her car as soon as she closed the door. She couldn't hold back her tears anymore. She couldn't understand why her relationship with Ryan was affecting her marriage, especially when Joan and other women in her circle had lovers but were happily married. She couldn't understand why it was so hard for her. Maybe she should tell her friends about it. She dismissed the thought, not wanting them to think she had messed up what they were effortlessly doing after work. She returned home and, as usual, took an afternoon shower. She didn't want David to suspect she had turned to Ryan for comfort after their fight, so she stuck to her usual routine. She hoped for a more polite conversation with her husband once he cooled down, so she took the time to tidy herself up. The truth was they couldn't continue to ignore the current situation. David arrived home late, closer to 9 euro in the evening, having warned Colin in advance. While waiting for him, she busied herself with dinner and light cleaning. David, can we talk? She asked. I don't know what else to say. Colleen, you started an affair, despite my objections. He replied, and it went on for almost a year. It seems you think the problem lies in my disagreement with this, not in the fact that you were involved in it. We won't come to an agreement, so why continue this conversation? Yes, I understand all your arguments, but I still believe we have the potential to become something more than we are now. We've been in a relationship for 25 years. Of course we can strive for more than our current position. Our current situation is the result of your betrayal. Colleen, it doesn't make sense. David countered. Joan, Alan, Gail, and Marge living happy, loving marriages and have lovers on the side with whom they spend time available. I don't understand why we can't achieve the same. Colleen pressed. David chuckled softly and invited his wife to sit down. You know when it all started? I was talking to their husbands. Well, except for Wendell. His adventures are well known and everyone knows he was unfaithful to Joan long before she would have done the same. But I talked to the others about why at first I hoped you would leave this. In the past I let you go on dates and even dated Ryan a couple of times during daytime dates. But after the second meeting, you made it clear that you planned to continue seeing him in the future. Not knowing what to do in such a situation, I turned to experienced husbands for advice to find out how they cope with such circumstances. They gave me some useful tips which I have been applying ever since. Oh, David, you're so attentive. Colleen was stunned by this discovery, as she hadn't noticed any efforts on David's part to strengthen their marriage. Did you know that of the 4 couples you admire, only Rick and Gail remained close after the wife had an affair? He continued. It turns out Joan started an affair in response to Wendell's infidelity. When Wendell found out about this, he ended his intimate relationship with her without any problems. I find it hard to believe, Colleen responded. Joan always talks about how happy they are. She's just pretending. They rarely spend time together, appearing as a happy couple, only at public events. They have separate bedrooms and they barely communicate, relying on texts and email. Marge, who had a failed marriage with Norm, found out about John's affair and decided to do the same. Despite this, their marriage has not improved, but Marge seems to be happier, since they are still married. Marge was constantly praising her marriage, probably because, like Joan, they wanted others to believe that they were doing well for older and well-off women like them. Maintaining a positive image was extremely important. Colleen said, well, they're my friends and would be honest with me. David just smiled back. Gail followed them and Rick admitted that at first he tried to ignore the signs and behave as usual. But over time he realized that after a few months she clearly lost interest in their relationship. She no longer found satisfaction in the mundane intimacy that she and her husband had as a married couple. Instead, she indulged in exciting illicit meetings with a young man after lunch. It was difficult for me to accept this revelation. It seems unlikely to me that my girlfriends would deceive me so much about their marriage. Perhaps husbands exaggerate in order to expose their wives in a negative light. I thought, and I doubt very much their husbands, with the exception of Wendell, do without intimacy. They found a simple solution to meet their physical needs. They hired personal assistants. It took a moment to realize the reality of this statement. When it happened, she was shocked. Is this the new girl you hired? She exclaimed. David seemed unfazed by Colleen's outburst. In fact, he was expecting this. I hired Elena, shortly after you gave that speech. He explained. I told the truth that Eileen needed help and that another position needed to be created. But in fact, I hired Elena based on her business qualities. She has a business education and was highly recommended. Her job required us to spend a lot of time together, so we got to know each other well. After a few months, I felt comfortable enough to trust her with everything that was on my mind. It was a huge relief to finally share my thoughts and feelings around this time. I noticed a change in her mood and it seemed to me that she was finally beginning to understand me. Since then, we can discuss any topic without hesitation. It was probably then that I noticed your mood had improved and it seemed to me that you were finally beginning to understand me. We told each other almost everything and became very close. When did you start dating? Just a couple of months ago. Unlike you, I don't jump into bed with someone I met in a cafe. Colleen visibly reacted to the insult. David went on to explain. We'd been coming to this for a long time. We had a natural laid-back relationship with a lot of flirting and understatement. I was sure she liked me, judging by her actions. Her gentle touch of her hands when we were standing close to each other ignited something in me. I found myself drawn to her in a way I hadn't expected. One evening we stayed late to finish a project, and as the night wore on, I didn't want to leave, since she lived alone and didn't have a specific place. We decided to have a few beers and chat, sitting side by side on the leather sofa in my office. We felt close to each other. "Oh my God, you made fun of me on that couch, David," she teased, to which he only smiled in response. "Okay, I get what you're talking about. I'm sorry." Thus began a new chapter. I thought, if you can do it, then I can do it. I always choose the time when you're busy, and you worked late on purpose to do that. As I said, you and I practically lived as neighbors. You made your decision, and I made mine. It's not equivalent, David. My time with Ryan didn't interfere with our time together. You can't say the same thing. Of course the situations were different. You were the first to leave the marriage. I just reacted. I understand that you tried to show concern by taking the initiative, and I recognize these efforts, despite my initial doubts, but I didn't feel obligated to pay attention in return. Colleen suffered, unable to get rid of the mental image of her husband's intimacy with another woman. For the first time, she truly realized how her relationship with Ryan, despite their boundaries, could affect David. She thought it would be easy to shut him out, but it turned out that it wasn't that easy. Several minutes passed before David S.B. woke again. "I need to tell you something else, Colleen," he said. "What is it exactly?" She managed to whisper Alana is pregnant about the second month. He said. Colleen's eyes widened, and she inhaled sharply. It seemed like everything was bad, but it got worse. "Is he yours?" Alana assured me that this is true, and she will confirm it. Colleen was stunned by this discovery. "How did this happen?" she asked. David took a deep breath before replying. "It was done intentionally."
Colleen staggered, stunned by the new blow.
She didn't know how much more she could take, but she needed to know the truth. It was time to put everything on the table, no matter how painful it was. "You got her pregnant. Was it intentional?" she asked. "But why? I have a successful company, Colleen, which we both own. I have no one else to give it to. I originally planned to sell the company when the time came, but I didn't like the idea anymore. My employees are like family, and I don't want to leave their future in the hands of a stranger or a large corporation. I'm thinking of leaving it to Alana or our child, depending on the time." "David, will you divorce me?" "At the moment, I do not plan to get divorced. I intend to maintain the current situation. Alana really wants to marry me and has even drawn up a prenuptial agreement in my favor. However, she is also satisfied that everything remains the same. The main thing is that we can spend time together. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. For now, everything remains as it is. You can keep seeing Ryan or whoever you want, and I'll be with Alana." It was too much. Was she naive? Colleen was caught off guard by this turn of events. She gathered up her purse and keys and stood up with a feeling of disbelief. "David, I need time to think about this," she said calmly. "I think I'll go by car and maybe stay out late. I'll text you so you don't worry with that." Colleen left the house and drove around the city without any purpose. How could things get out of control? Her own husband had a secret lover, a young and stunning woman with a dark complexion and beautiful, long wavy brown hair. She assumed Alana was Hispanic, but she wasn't sure. During the trip, she sent David messages from time to time, and his response was always the same: "Please be safe." She was comforted by the fact that he still cared about her well-being. Finally, around 2:00 in the morning, she arrived home and wearily entered the house. David was asleep, but the bedside lamp had been left on, so she could see. She changed her clothes in the closet and came out to find David awake and sitting. "Are you okay, Colleen?" David asked worriedly. "Yes, it's okay. I'm just tired." "Teddy, let's rest and talk tomorrow," she replied and went to bed. The next day passed without much conversation, as they seemed to have nothing to talk about. David went to work and Colleen spent time with her friends. She briefly considered canceling her plans with Ryan, but eventually decided to keep them. To her surprise, she was grateful that they had spent time together. Ryan noticed that something was wrong, and instead of physical intimacy, they started a meaningful conversation when they made love. It was gentle and unhurried. In the weeks that followed, time seemed to fly by unnoticed. David, now openly maintaining a relationship with Alana, often stayed in the office. Although Ken understood the reason for his absence, it still hurt her, and she began to worry that her health was suffering. She started experiencing stomach sensitivity, which was unusual for Colleen, who had never had such issues before. She began to believe that her marriage was harming her health. In the end, she decided to see a doctor. Colleen Lynch got out of the elevator on the 7th floor of her husband's office building and went to his office. Terry, the secretary, tried to intercept her, knowing that her boss and Alana were inside alone and possibly in a compromising situation. "Mrs. Lynch, wait," Terry called out to her. Colleen paused, turned to Terry, whom she had always liked, and smiled encouragingly. "It's all right, Terry. I'm already aware of the situation. Thank you for your kindness and care." Terry stood aside, unable to intervene, as Colleen walked down the hallway to her husband's office without knocking. She entered and saw Alana sitting on her husband's lap. The sound of the door opening made them both turn their heads. Alana got up quickly and hurried to the private bathroom. "Colleen, what's going on? Why are you here?" David asked. "We need to talk." "David," she replied when Alana reappeared. David asked, "Couldn't you have waited until late at night?" "It could have," Colleen admitted. "Since this also concerns Alana, I decided that we should discuss it here." Everyone sat down, Ken on one end, David on the other. Alana sat on the armrest behind David. Colleen handed David a folder of documents on filing for divorce. She said his expression was unforgettable. Despite the gravity of the moment and the pain she was feeling, Colleen was almost amused by it. "Are you divorcing me?" "Yes, David. I think these conditions will seem acceptable to you. I do not claim ownership of the company, but as compensation, I asked for a little more in monetary terms." David looked at the conditions in the document and saw nothing terrible. It was probably less than what the court would have given her. This happened when I was in the 1st or 2nd year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. A settlement agreement was out of the question. The only thing that interested David was why. Now there are several reasons, but mostly because I love you. I need to explain something to you. I've loved you since the day we met at Sheila Mullen's pool party when we were 17 years old. We have been together for almost 26 years, more than half of our lives. I don't want anything but for you to be happy. Unfortunately, I made a terrible mistake that irreparably damaged our relationship. I'm letting you go so that you can find happiness with Alana and your new baby." Colleen looked at Alana. Her face lit up with joy at the prospect of marrying the man she loves. David was stunned by the news. "What about you, Colleen? Your generosity will provide for me for the rest of my life. I'm starting a new chapter and I'm a little anxious. It's exciting. A lot of women live on their own, Colin. I'm sure you'll be fine." "Actually, that's not what I'm talking about. I won't be alone for long. It looks like I'm pregnant." The folder of papers fell to the floor with a loud thud, and David stared at his future ex-wife in disbelief. They never had children together. They preferred to enjoy life together and travel whenever they wanted. After several years of living child-free, their marriage came to an end. They were both separately embarking on a new adventure, parenthood. The child's father was Ryan, or at least that's what David assumed. The baby was supposed to belong to Ryan, unless Colleen was unfaithful to him. Despite the bombshell, Colleen took it calmly and even joked about it. "And what kind of woman do you take me for?" she said in a light tone and grinned. "Well, I think we already know the answer, don't we?" "Yes, it belongs to Ryan, has always been and will always be lonely. And now we will be together." "Are you planning to keep the baby?" "Thanks to your generosity, I will have the opportunity to care of the child as well as hire a full-time nanny whose expenses you will indirectly cover." As you may have noticed, I expressed a desire not to leave the house. It came as a surprise to me, but I don't want to argue. I have always had a deep affection for this house, and I believe it will be the perfect place to raise my child with the help of a babysitter. "I think you're right, Colleen. I have to say I really didn't expect this, but it makes sense." "Have you shared this news with your friends?" "Yes, they know we had a serious conversation about their deceptive behavior and lies. They expressed regret that they had led me astray, but I assured them that I take responsibility for my decisions. In the end, they told the truth, but only I am seeking a divorce, which means that I'm taking a step in the right direction. If you ever need help, don't hesitate to contact me. I feel like it's time to become a mother, and I think Ryan would be the perfect father with that." Colleen stood up. David and Alana did the same, after which Colleen hugged them both. Then she turned around and left the same way she had entered. David really believed that Ryan would take care of Colleen and her baby, but that didn't happen. When Colleen told Ryan that they were having a baby, his reaction was explosive. Ryan started yelling at Colleen, claiming that she was a stupid woman and he only needed her for fun. Now that she was free from her husband, he didn't need her. Colleen felt pained and could not believe that this evil, vile and rude man was actually the loving and attentive man with whom she shared the best times over the past year. Colleen became ill and lost consciousness. When she woke up in the hospital, she was told that she had lost her baby. The grief Colleen felt was boundless. She couldn't get over the shocking news because of her stupidity. She lost a loving husband and a child whom she had not dared to give birth to for so many years.